In project 4-1, we will cover make directory command, copying files with CP, moving or renaming files with MV, and how to use the period and double period for current directory and parent directory. You'll need your Linux machine started. Use Ctrl F1 to get to the graphical screen if you're not already there, and log in as sample user 1. When you log in, we'll launch the terminal from the activities menu. We'll also launch the File Explorer from the activities menu. In the File Explorer, we'll click the middle icon in the top right. In the far left, we'll click the File Manager icon, go to Preferences, click Allow Folders to be Expanded, then close the preferences. Now on the left side at the bottom, click Other Locations. On the right side, double-click Computer. Scroll down and find Root. Double-click. Enter pass1234 as the password. With this window open, we see the files we created in Project 3, Sample 1, Sample 2, and Sample 3. We also have Sample in there. I'm going to move the windows around so that I can see the File Manager and the command prompt at the same time. From the command prompt, we want to log in as root by typing su-, pressing enter, and supplying the root password. Now we'll type ls-F, press enter. Here we see the same listing of files as in the File Manager. We'll continue on by making a directory with the mkdir command, followed by my samples. Now we'll type ls-F. We see a directory has been created. The -F puts a / behind any directory. That way, if we are looking at a monochrome monitor screen, we can determine if it is a directory or a file by the trailing /. In the File Explorer window, you can click and use your F5 key to refresh the screen. You'll see My Samples was created. I'll click back into the terminal window and continue on. We can change directories into My Samples. I'm going to type cd space my and use my tab to complete. Pressing enter, issuing ls-F shows us no files are in this folder because we just created it. Let's create 2 more subfolders. mkdir under my samples. Create an additional file, mkdir to delete. Now I'll type ls-F to see if they are created. In the File Explorer window, I can click the arrow beside My Samples, and I can see that the 2 subfolders were created. Hopefully, seeing this visually and from the command prompt will help you understand file structure. Continuing on with the lab, we'll click back in the terminal window. We'll learn about the double dots. Typing cd space and placing 2 periods will have us change directory. And 2 periods means parent directory. So we'll go up 1 level. Notice command prompt changed. I'm no longer inside of my samples. I am back up into the root home folder. Typing pwd, I see that I am in root. I can also type ls and press enter to see the sample files in the my sample directory we originally created. Graphically, I can also see that I am under /root and seeing the same files. Let's continue on and look at the ls-R. Pressing enter shows all of the subfolders that we have created from our point down. We want to issue the cd space ... command 1 additional time. Typing pwd will have us at the / directory. If you're working through this lab, make sure that you keep trying cd space ... until when you type pwd, you only see a /. Now, let's type mkdir space for user1 and press enter. Typing ls-F and pressing enter, you will see many directories listed, including bin, boot, dev, etc. And then you'll come to for user1. So double check your screen against this one. Did you create for user1 in the correct location? Next, type cd and press enter. This is a shortcut to jump us right back to our home folder. In our case, we are logged in at the terminal as root, so we're taken to /root. Type ls-L and press enter. Here we get a long listing showing permissions, time creation, and file names. So now we know we are back in our root home folder. Let's look at moving, or I should say copying files. So let's copy the sample1 file, cp space sample1 and press enter. Excuse my typo. I'll correct the misspelling. I still have an error. My first error is I accidentally typed cd instead of cp. Following the lab, correcting and typing cp sample1, I get another error. Missing a destination. CP requires a source file and a location. You can't copy a file if you don't specify where to put the file, the new file being created. Let's try again. CP sample1 space sample1 with a capital A and press enter. Now we'll type ls-L and press enter. This time we made a copy of sample1 in a new file name called sample1a. You'll notice the file sizes are both the same. Your file size may be different. Mine are both 609. Let's continue. Let's copy sample1 into my samples and name it sample1b. Press enter. If you do ls-L or ls-F, we will not see sample1b created. In this instance, we copied it inside of my samples. Let's now change directory into my samples. And then press ls-L. Was the file created? It should be inside of this directory. At this point, you'll want to take a screenshot. This will be a multi-screenshot lab, So save it for later submission. Once your screenshot is complete, let's move on. Let's copy and do an absolute path from the root directory to the root home folder called root / sample2 space period. So here we have the complete path to the sample2 file, followed by a space and a period. The usefulness of the period means copy here. I'll press enter. It is much simpler than typing the alternative. Instead of putting a period, we would have to put the full path as root my samples. It's a lot more typing. So instead of that, we were already in that directory, my samples. We were able to just put a period. Did it work? ls-l, press enter. So sample2 was copied into this directory. Now let's copy from this directory sample1b, and let's copy it one directory up. We can use the double dots to tell it to copy the sample1b in the directory we are in to the directory right above us. Press enter. Now I'm going to change directory and use the double dot to exit the My Samples folder and go back to the root. Now typing ls-l, I should see sample1b, and we have it. So the dot and double dot are very useful shortcuts when copying or moving files or changing directories. Next, let's copy sample1, sample2, sample3 into my samples. Press enter. We've already copied sample2 into my samples, so we're getting a question. Do you want to overwrite the file? Since they both exist as the same file name. Go ahead and answer yes. Change back into the My Samples folder and type ls-l. Press enter. Now we have all three files, sample1, sample2, and sample3 inside the folder. Let's go and look at the graphical file manager again. Highlight My Samples and hit F5 on your keyboard. I double clicked. It's going to ask us to enter the password again for root. It may or may not have asked you to do that. So as I double clicked My Samples, I see the same output. I'm going to go back up and click root. I'm going to click the arrow beside My Samples again. I'm going to expand the window out so I can see everything. So we can see that we copied sample 1, 2, and 3 into this subfolder, My Samples. Go back to the terminal screen. Now we want to go back a directory. So change directory, and I can use ... and press enter. Let's make a whole new directory. Let's see if we can copy My Samples to a new directory name called My Samples 2. Pressing enter will give us an error, and we cannot copy an entire directory. Let's use the up arrow key and provide a switch for the CP command, a -R. This tells it to recursively enter a directory and copy all the files, including the directory name itself, to a new location. Press enter. So now the copy command knew that it needed to act recursively, which means go into the folder and subfolders, copy all of them into a new directory location. Type ls-l, press enter. We now have two directories. Instead of going into mysamples2, we can type ls-l space mysamples2, press enter. We see it has the same files and same subfolders as mysamples. Graphically, we can go back to our screen, click F5, and I can expand out mysamples2, and I can expand out my samples. Depending on how long you waited, it may ask you to authenticate again with the root password. Back at the terminal screen, we want to take our second screenshot at this time. Again, there will be a third screenshot to take for this lab, so save this until you get to the end. Now we will move on to the move command. Let's type mv sample1 and press enter. We'll get the similar error when we just try to copy before sample1. There's missing a destination. Let's move sample1 to a new file name, sample4. I'm not specifying any new directory. So when you don't specify a new directory with the move command, it renames the current file. Type ls-l, press enter. I see sample1 no longer shows up. It is now renamed sample4. Now let's actually move sample4 into another location. Let's move it to my samples. As I type ls-l, sample4 no longer shows up. Change directory into my samples, pressing ls-l. Here we see sample4 now exist inside the subfolder my samples. Let's move sample4 again using the space and the double dots, pressing enter. Here we're taking advantage of the parent directory shortcut. ls-l, sample4 no longer resides in this folder. cd space ... press enter. We backed out of my samples back to the root directory. ls-l, sample4 is now back in the original location. Let's move it again. So move sample4 to the my samples directory, but this time put a / and name it sample2. Press enter. So now we're doing two steps. We're moving sample4 into a subfolder and renaming it. Since there already exists a sample2 file in that folder, it wants us to answer yes or no to overwrite that file. This is a safety mechanism. So let's go ahead and yes to overwrite the file. Now let's move multiple files this time. Type mv sample ? If you remember from chapter 3, the question mark represents a single character. So all files that start with sample and have a single character at the end will be moved. Use space, my samples, and press enter. Here it wants us to overwrite the files again. So click yes to sample2 and sample3. ls-l. The files have disappeared. You can also go to the graphical screen. Use your F5 to refresh. And notice that the files have been moved into my samples and no longer reside under root. Now we'll use the asterisk command. Move sample 1 asterisk into my samples. In this case, we have sample 1A and sample 1B. If we had anything else that started with sample 1, it would move all of those files into the My Samples folder. Press Enter and enter Y to overwrite. ls-l. All the original sample 1 files are no longer in the root directory. They've all been moved into My Samples. Change into My Samples. Issue ls-l. Here you should see 3 sample 1 files, including the sample 2 and sample 3 file. This is the last screenshot to take. Once you take this screenshot, submit all 3 images for this assignment. I'll finish out the lab. cd space ... Do a ls-f. See what files exist. And I'm going to rename a directory. I'm going to move my samples to samples and press enter. ls-l shows us that I renamed the directory from my samples to simply samples. So we learned about copying files, moving files, renaming files, and renaming directories. Please continue playing around with these 2 commands. Maybe make your own files with touch and make your own directories to practice with.